Start playing some bagpipe. We're going full Scotsman because we're making shortbread. This cookie recipe, or biscuit depending on where you're from, is so easy. It's as easy as 1, 2, 3. Literally. It is 1 part sugar, 2 parts butter, 3 parts flour. That's it. You can quite literally stop the cookie recipe right there if you wanted. I do have a couple co-stars in here, but just that ensemble, you're good to go, son. I'm gonna use a stand mixer. You could use this by hand. I have a stand mixer and I'm lazy, so I'm gonna use this. Your stand mixer should be fitted with a paddle attachment. So into the stand mixer, I'm putting 200 grams of butter, or 15 tablespoons if you're going by volume. I'm using 100 grams or a half a cup of granulated sugar. While shortbread could technically be sugar, butter, and flour and exist in of itself, and that'd be perfectly fine, I find that there are a couple extra ingredients that just add more balance and flavor and really carry this recipe out. Salt. I'm gonna be adding a half a teaspoon of just regular table salt, and then a teaspoon of vanilla extract. So I'm gonna add that in there. We're gonna pretend I added the vanilla and the salt at the same time as the butter. To this mixture, we're gonna add 300 grams or 2 1/4 cups of all-purpose flour in 2 parts. And the reason why we're adding the flour in 2 parts now and not all at once is because we wanna keep this dough short. Now, what does that mean? Why? What do you mean keep it short? Why is it called shortbread anyway? Well, you want to keep the chains of protein or gluten short. So how gluten or wheat protein works is when it's wet and it's mixed around, or if you're working it, the chains of protein get linked together, and the more you move it around, the stronger it gets. The more it becomes like Mr. Fantastic. It can stretch. So think of when you have a nice fresh baked bread, that is gluten or wheat protein working to keep the bonds together. It doesn't just immediately crumble like a cracker. To prevent those long chains of protein, you could introduce a lot of fat to it. So think of someone trying to hold on to someone's hand and pull them up if they're hanging off the side of a building. Right? If their hands are dry and they're really strong and they work out, he'll be able to easily pull up his friend from falling off the side of a cliff or a building. But if his hand's full of grease, he's a greased up hand, guess what? They're not holding on to that. That friend's no. While that's a very disturbing way to describe what fat can do to protein in this mixture, that's what we want. We want the chains of gluten to be disturbingly short. If you add the flour in 2 parts, what you're doing is, instead of it taking a little bit longer for it to mix in and causing possibly longer chains than necessary, you are having only half the dough have slightly longer chains than the other half will have shorter chains. So different size chains, it's just gonna make for a more tender texture in your mouth. The mouthfeel of this is just incredible, trust me. So half this in there. We're not gonna mix it for much, so we're gonna do like maybe 30 seconds. Now we're gonna add the other half of the flour mixture. We're gonna use a plastic bag and a rolling pin. This is a trick that I learned from Brunella Booz, an incredible baker, about putting your dough in a plastic bag so that way you can shape it, because it will force it to be level and it will already be into a nice little square. It's fucking brilliant, I love it. Close. So we're gonna put this in the, not the oven, we're gonna put this in the fridge for at least until the butter firms. Now we're gonna use a dough that I made earlier, but it's kind of hard to completely take this out of the bag the way it is. You have to basically destroy the bag. You can't reuse this. I don't mind mentioning a French baker when I'm talking about this Scottish recipe, because historically France and Scotland actually got along pretty well because they had a common enemy. That enemy was England. Why is it even called bread? There's nothing bready about it, right? It's a cookie or a biscuit. Well, like many points in history, tax evasion has really influenced a lot of aspects of our lives. Apparently, biscuits or cookies had a special tax in Great Britain. So the Scottish bakers said, no, don't you try and tax this. This is not gonna get that biscuit tax. This is bread. We all eat it like bread, right? Because there's salt in it, and it's mainly butter and flour. It's barely any sugar in there. It's not the same. The Scottish bakers wanted it to be classified as a bread so people wouldn't be taxed for a sweet dessert cookie. And the English were like, really? Yeah, it's a bread, I swear. The British were like, fine. They got away with it. So now it's shortbread when it's a biscuit or cookie. I'm actually not done with adding flavor to this. I'm going to add a little bit more sugar on top of it, just more granulated sugar. And you don't have to do this. You don't have to add any sugar to it. It's fantastic the way it is. But I'm going to be a little bit extra. They have a thing called Vanillen Zucker, which is vanilla sugar in German. I'm going to just kind of add it on here and roll it in. We're gonna cut this into squares. You could measure it if you wanted, or you could eyeball it and be a G. To make it into squares, go cut it in half and then cut those parts in half. Cut off the parts that you don't like you're a Kardashian, or me. This type of cookie, luckily, doesn't spread out very much when it bakes, unlike a chocolate chip cookie, so you don't have to worry about too much about the spacing. One thing that this type of a cookie does is it can puff up in the oven. So you want to kind of prick it. I like to use a giant fork. Do it 3 times per square. Now that you've pricked these cookies, you're gonna put this in the oven, and the oven, of course, you preheat it to 325 degrees. I told you that in the beginning, right? Right. When it comes to baking shortbread, I try not to stress bake times as much as I want to stress the actual color of the cookie or biscuit itself. The reason why is when it comes to proper shortbread, ideally, you're going to want your cookie to be this very soft platinum blonde color. Brad Mondo is going to want to approve the color of this blonde. This is a level 10 blonde right here. This kind of dirty blonde redhead color tastes incredible. No one's going to turn this cookie down. But if you're wanting to shoot for perfection or tradition, you want to go for the super light color. Now, I understand it can be very difficult to know if it's done. So if you kind of touch its surface, even if it's a little bit hot, you tap it and it's kind of not soft anymore. And when I say soft, I mean it's not dough-like soft. That's how you know it's done. Now that you have baked your delicious shortbread cookies, you can always give them to your friends in a nice gift bag, a wax-lined box. You can store them and save them for other recipes, or you can eat them all yourself, which is most likely what's going to happen. So thank you for watching. Don't count how many that are on this tray because I only baked 15.